What's up everyone? Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to do another video which this time is on Fougere fragrances. I had a great response to my spectrum idea, so what I'm going to do today is present a spectrum of Fougeres. Now the term Fougere comes from the French word fern, so it kind of relates to fragrances which are green and aromatic and damp. Some very famous Fougeres are things such as Dracar Noir. And it's a classification of perfumery which lends itself to those scents which are they sort of smell like the damp forest floor, something green or vernal about them. So I'm going to start with Fougeres in the spectrum which are lighter, moving through to those which are really quite heavy, and that's where we sort of enter barbershop territory. Barbershop is a term used in, I guess, in fragrance circles that sort of relate to that smell of shaving foam, that kind of experience when you go to the barbershop, you get the smell of shaving foam and you get that sort of old-fashioned, one could almost say, barbershop experience. Anyway, we'll kick it off with number one, and today's number one is Washington Tremlett. Washington Tremlett Hampstead Water. Washington Tremlett's a brand that I touched upon in my Rose Spectrum video, and they were shirt makers and have been around since the 1870s. Now, I adore this particular fragrance. It's one that I sampled around 2010, fell for, and have only just recently got my hands on a couple of full bottles. Washington Tremlett Hampstead Water is inspired by Hampstead Heath in the UK, which is this sprawling kind of beautiful reserve, almost like this big garden full of lakes and lovely sort of green trees and willows and you name it. It's quite a gorgeous area, and I really do get a sense of that in this bottle. It's got great notes in there. There's watermint, which I find really unusual. Obviously there's citrus. It's sort of got the traditional Fougere lavender steeping through that, and quite a woody base. It's a scent which, for me, it's like you're sitting on the edge of the water watching springtime play out in front of you, the symphony of the change of the seasons. It's kind of damp, it's got that lake-like kind of vibe to it. The smell of leaf litter and, you know, that sort of rousing smell you get right at the beginning of spring when winter's gone and you start to think, oh wow, the warm weather is just around the corner. That's number one on the spectrum. Number two in the spectrum, I have Iceberg Fluid Man. Now, Iceberg is a brand that is quite popular in Europe and I believe in the US, but here in Australia it didn't really make such a splash. That being said, I distinctly remember the launch of this fragrance back in 2000. It's a really unusual scent. In fact, it is Fougere, but it also dances into other perfume classifications as well. But the reason I've put it here is because I get more of a Fougere kind of experience with it. It's got every citrus in it that you can imagine. There's lemon, bergamot, orange, lime, it's all there. Plus there's peach, there's magnolia and freesia, and there's a great base with oak moss, nutmeg, there's vetiver. There's all sorts of fragrances and notes in this particular scent, and it's quite complex. It comes across as sort of a damp, greeny Fougere, but it's got lovely little nuances with sweetness, which you sort of pull from the peach, and lovely nuances from the spices like the nutmeg and everything. It kind of sits number two in the spectrum because it's a step away from that very green kind of spring type fragrance into territory which goes a little bit darker, a little bit more towards autumn perhaps. It remains a favourite of mine and an incredible compliment getter. My wife adores this on me, but not only that, I've had colleagues, I've had random strangers come up to me in coffee shops while I've been queuing saying, what are you wearing? And you know, it's kind of difficult when you've got a scent which is quite rare or quite difficult to find in the market that you live in. But yeah, Fluid Man by Iceberg is a cracker. Let's look at number three, Narciso Rodriguez For Him. I did do a little review on this in a previous reel on my Instagram, but it is a Fougere that I adore. This was created in 2007 by Francis Kirk-de-Jean, and it's a beauty. It is a really unusual, unorthodox Fougere. It does have that sense of dampness. It smells to me like clouds that are pregnant with rain, ready to burst and, you know, pour all over the city, wet concrete and damp forest. It's got 4 main ingredients. There's violet leaf, musk, patchouli, and amber. And it's really diffusive too. Quite an unusual scent, one that's proved quite divisive between perfumisti, but for me, it's a winner every time. This one is creeping towards that sort of barbershop territory, which is why we have it pretty much halfway along the spectrum. Definitely one that I love, and one that's actually getting a little bit harder to source, here in Australia at least. I'm not sure if it's been discontinued, but it's certainly one, if you have fallen in love with in the past, grab a backup. You never know when it's going off market. Our 4th entry in the spectrum, I have the original Trussardi Uomo. This one was launched in 1983 and it was created by perfumer Beatrice Piquet. Now, Uomo is one of those fragrances which as soon as it touches your nose, you're familiar with that Fougere kind of category. It is very complex and I'm going to struggle to list even a portion of the notes in here. It has lavender, there's bergamot, there's basil, caraway, orris, vetiver, patchouli, musk, amber. It's so dense and rich and diffusive. Uomo is one of those scents which has been re-released in modern years, at least with the same name in a very similar looking bottle by Trussardi. But the modern one really doesn't compare to the previous formula. This one is spectacular. It comes in the snakeskin hard shell bottle. And yeah, this one I've got great scent associations with too. I wore this on the night I graduated from university back in 1993 or 4. And yeah, it's just got one of those very memorable Fougere footprints. I'm loving it, and I think if you get your hands on an old bottle of it, you will too. Number 5 in the spectrum, I'm looking at Yves Saint Laurent Rive Gauche Light Pour Homme. Now, the Rive Gauche franchise for men that sort of appeared in the early 2000s was authored by Tom Ford whilst he was at the helm of the company. And I really loved the approach he took to perfume at the time. Rive Gauche Pour Homme and indeed the light and intense versions all really typified that barbershop Fougere aesthetic. And for me, the light version is sensational. It's got great notes with anise, mint, bergamot, geranium, there's vetiver. It's just a wonderful kind of brisk, light Fougere, but one that really, really talks about that barbershop foam, that experience of going into an old style barbershop, having your face wrapped in a hot towel, a nice sort of cutthroat razor shave, and the cologne that they sort of sprinkle on you at the end. It is a sensational scent, and all of its siblings I adore. Each of them give a different nuance to this Fougere fragrance, which I love. Number 6, and the last one in our spectrum, is Bvlgari Malakeos. Now this fragrance in particular is difficult for me to pronounce. I'm not sure if it's Malakeos, if it's Malakeos, whatever it is, but I come from Greek background, and it closely resembles a word which we use with mad abandon, which is probably one I shouldn't repeat here. But the name kind of refers to malachite. The Bvlgari gem collection all have names which reference closely stones. So this one, as evidenced by the lid here, malachite. It is a really green Fougere fragrance, and in fact, I would call it the Mac Daddy of Fougeres. Everyone seems to think that, Yves Saint Laurent Pour Homme is kind of where that barbershop end point is, but this one takes it even a little bit further. Lavender, geranium, musk, patchouli, and gaiac wood, it's all here, and it's so big and so diffusive that you can't but see it coming. When I've worn this and walked into a room, walked around a little bit and then left, people can still smell a trace of me after I've gone. And it's not for having oversprayed it either. It really is one of those persistent scents that leaves a cloud in your wake. It is a great bottle, and in fact, very weighty and feels very substantial in the hand. I think Malakeos is one of those scents which you'd really come by. It has proven divisive in some perfume circles. Some people say it's too much a barbershop scent, whilst others adore it for the fact that it sort of turns that Rive Gauche volume up to 11. Anyway, there's a brief rundown of the Fougere spectrum. I hope you find something amongst those that might, interest you, or you might want to go out and test. I certainly enjoy the classification, and I love putting new things under my nose from that particular group of fragrances. Let me know your favorite Fougere fragrances in the comments below. Tell me if you've tested any of these scents and what your thoughts are. I'd love it if you'd hit the subscribe button or share, and check back in soon. I'll be back with another video shortly.